Islam and greetings. Princeanaelbey, Divine Prince of the Divine Theocracy of the Moorish Science Temple of America through Temple Alhambra. Today, we're going to discuss, I'm going to tell you about some ancient geology. Check that. Ancient geography. We'll leave geography for later. But today we're going to discuss ancient geography. And we're going to move right into what is considered modern geography. So let's begin at the beginning. In the beginning, when Allah created the earth, it was one gigantic land mass. It was called the Age of Pangaea, when Earth was simply one gigantic land mass. It did have three names. Those names were Amehim, spelled A-M-E-X-E-M. It is pronounced Amehim. And then there was the land of Canaan. And then there was the land of Asia. Today, Asia is still called Asia. The land of Canaan is now known as Canada. And the northwest part of Amehim is now called America. It is Northwest Africa. And this is what happened. What happened was, a few things happened actually just before the cataclysm, such as there were people here and all these other wonderful things, people, animals, etc. They were all here during the age of Pangaea. And of course, they disobeyed their prophets. And of course, they paid the ultimate price for it. They were disappeared. They were disappeared in that cataclysm. Now, what the cataclysm did was it broke Earth up into pieces. What people know as Africa is Southeast Africa. What people know as America is Northwest Africa. Now, let's stay in Northwest Africa for a minute. And I'm going to ask you some questions from time to time. Here's one of them now. Since this is Northwest Africa, what you didn't know and what you were never educated to is the fact that this is Northwest Africa. However, since having broken off from the southeastern portion of herself, because that's what happened when the cataclysm occurred, Africa separated herself from herself. And she floated to to where she is now, and parts of her floated down into the area that is commonly known as the South Pacific Islands. That includes Australia, that's Africa. That's Africa. Bougainville, that's Africa. Tahiti, it's Africa. Fiji, it's Africa. It's Africa. They are all Africans. They're all Africans. But now, let's just stick to Northwest Africa. During my time down in the District of Columbia, my scholarship took me many places. One of the places was the George Washington Memorial Masonic Museum. And of course, I got shutter happy because the only thing that entire place told me was, this is the Hall of the Conquerors. Now, just so that you understand clearly that this is Northwest Africa, question, how many countries are in Southeast Africa? All right, can't be that hard for you. I'll help you out. It's what, 52, 53 countries in Southeast Africa? There were no fewer than 47 or 48 countries here. Let me show you. This is a picture that I took at the museum, at the George Washington Memorial Museum. That is where this picture was taken. This exhibit, from what I understand now, is no longer on display there. What these fezzes represent are the countries which George Washington and his United States Military Corporation conquered in this land. In this land, these are the countries that are here. And I will help you discern which one is which. And I will start with the country that my mother was born in. Now, my mother was Henasi Moore. My father was Bushu Moore, out of Abba. My mother, she was Henasi Moore, out of Aladdin. Aladdin is commonly mispronounced as Aladdin. It is not Aladdin. It is pronounced Aladdin. And let me see. Where is she? Oh, there she is. This is Aladdin. This is Aladdin. Aladdin is now known as the state of Oklahoma. It is the country of Aladdin. My father, he was Bushu Moore, out of Abba. Abba is now known as the state of Missouri. Are you starting to understand why it is important to get you to confirm these countries as states? It adds legitimacy to the title of that corporation known as the United States. Because if all of these countries were conquered, and they were, these are Shriner fezzes, by the way. These are the fezzes that the Shriners wear. These are Shriners' fezzes. They desecrated our religious headdress like this by putting the names of the countries they have conquered on them. It's a badge of honor. These are the countries that were here in Northwest Africa. They have all been conquered, and they were redesignated as states. And they are still countries. Let me help you. Now, if you'll remember, in a prior lesson, you learned that Pope Innocent III, he declared all of the lands of earth vacant. And that is why those murdering marauders that he set loose on the world, that is why they are referred to as explorers. The Pope said all the lands were vacant, with nobody on them. And if you do find people on them, you can kill them and slaughter them because they are savages. If they are not Christian, they are savages. And that is how those conquerors became known as explorers in your twistery books. They weren't explorers, weren't exploring anything. They were doing the work of the church. They were doing the work of the church. And if I were to be bothered by such a thing as happened near recently, I would be bothered by Pope Francis of Rome going to the people of Maya, Inca, and Aztlan to apologize for setting the conquistadors loose on them. Now, if I were to have an issue with this, the issue I would have is, how do you go to South and Central America and bypass Greater Mauritania? You didn't think that you needed to apologize to the Moors here after you sent George and the rest of those conquerors here? Under, mind you, the pretext of establishing commerce in another land. You didn't feel the need to come here and apologize to us, though, huh? Well, I guess not. Because your plan for subduing Greater Mauritania worked out just perfectly for you. The Moors here, be they tribal Moor or Asiatic Moor, they're nothing to you. They're nothing to you. And this I understand, Pope Francis. I understand this. But other people may not. Other people may not. I understand. Many people, they just read about your visit to South America. And a lot of them were asking, what's he apologizing for? Well, they had to spell that out, didn't they? Because you sent those conquistadors there to conquer those people. Look what you did to the Aztecs. You've got them calling themselves Mexicans, and you know there were no such people before the conquistadors came. They're not Mexican. But the one thing you did do was you left a part of the ancient name of Africa on Mexico, didn't you? M-E-X. I'm a him. It's Mexico. They still left M-E-X in Mexico. That is a part of Africa's ancient name. I'm a him. A-M-E-X-E-M. Now, you also need to know and understand that everything that happened in the Bible happened over here. It happened over here. And all the documentaries that you see where they are filming in Israel, well, when those cameras take you through those 1,000-year-old passages and archways and streets, when you hear that liar say to you, we are walking through the streets of ancient Jerusalem, that is a lie. That is a lie. There is no such place as ancient Jerusalem. And here's why. In 1948, the United States and its allies, because the Israelites had no home, they were never to have a home. Never. So what the United States and her allies did was it plopped Israel down in Jordan's front yard and in Palestine's backyard. And I do not really consider 1948 to be ancient. There is no such place as ancient Jerusalem. It is a lie. Israel didn't get there until 1948. What's ancient about 1948? There are still people living today born in 1948. I don't consider them ancient at all. Not at all. But Back to the lesson. Now, geographically, what occurred was the popes, they started moving countries and putting them other places. As I taught you early in an earlier video, Tripoli, the country of Tripoli, is now called Wisconsin. Tunis is now called Minnesota. The Sahara, it is now called Iowa. The land of Egypt is now known as the state of Illinois. And sitting right next door, just to the east, was India. It was the country of India. Its name now is the state of Indiana. It still has India in its name. I have documents from when it too was in the 1800s. And the church put India in Asia. India is right next door to Egypt. And right next door to India is Galilee. Galilee. It is also known as the North Gate. Now, since it was a common practice during ancient times to name, let me put it like this. It was not uncommon for a city to have the same name as an entire province. And so the state of Michigan was actually Galilee, all of it. And that's where Uncle David lived, King David. In the city of Galilee, which is now called Detroit, in the city of Galilee was, well, just outside, partially in, partially out, when Uncle David allowed the Jews to settle there. Well, Rome decided to ride herd on the Jews. And it did for a long time. Rome rode a herd on the Jews. Well, Rome came here to ride herd on the Jews. That is how Pontius Pilate became the prefect, the governor, etc., over the Jews. And it was okay by us. It was okay by Uncle Dave. We weren't at war with Rome. We were not at war with Rome. And so if the Romans wanted to come here and chaperone those wandering people who had no home, then Uncle David opened up a portion of Galilee to. Well, that's how they came to be there. And the entire truth of Pontius Pilate, Jerusalem, and the Pharisees, those are lessons for other days. Then I think you're going to enjoy them. So, if you look at a so-called map of the current America, I'm going to let me confer these degrees on you. When you look at a map of America, right in its heartland, you're going to see, reading from left to right, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. Now, if you were to write down those first letters of those three states that I just mentioned, and you use the block letter capital I, you're going to come up with a Roman numeral. That Roman numeral you're going to come up with is 3. And Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, that is not a coincidence. The reason those 3 states sitting right next door to each other begin with I is because when you put those first letters together, they form the Roman numeral 3 in honor of Pope Innocent III, right in the heart of America. You see, the Romans were crafty. They were crafty. You didn't know any of this. And it is all things that you can find for yourself. This is the easy part of the course. This is the easy part of the course. These are things you can find for yourself so that you can see for self. And when you see for self, you are in a much better position to know thyself. Islam. So, Pope Innocent III, he began that. But the succeeding popes, as well, they kept it going. They kept it going. Example, Chicago. The city of Chicago is the original city of Egypt. The whole of Illinois, all the way down to Tennessee, is the land of Egypt. It's the land of Egypt. As a matter of fact, where is it? It's on here. It's on here. Where are you? Haifa. Here's India, when they conquered India. And then there is, where are you? Now, share Al-Quran. Been heard. Well, it's on here. I don't want to spend the rest of this time looking for it. But the fez for Egypt is also in here, because they conquered this place. If you're not familiar with it, I'd advise you to check out the seal of the state of Illinois. The state seal. Herbs and Orthos. Herbs and Orthos. What it means is, translated, what that means is, to the last man. That's the motto on the seal of the state of Illinois. Now, Pope Innocent III, because Egypt was the crown jewel. Egypt was the crown, well, it was one of the crown jewels. It had several. Morocco was one of them. So what the Pope did was he took Egypt from here and he put it in Barbara. Now, Barbara is that whole northern tip part of Southeast Africa with countries with names like Libya, well, check that, Egypt, Libya, Tunis, Morocco, Algiers, Sahara, all of that. That's called Barbara, all of it. And one way you can actually confirm that that is not the true Egypt is when you look at a map of Egypt. even with my abysmal public school education, I learned that upper goes this way and lower goes this way. But if you look at that map, up top, it's going to say Lower Egypt, isn't it? And on the bottom of that, it's going to say Upper Egypt. See, he tried to do like a mirror image kind of thing. He tried doing it because that's ridiculous, isn't it? How is up down and down up? Like I said, even with this public school education, I knew better than that. I knew better than that. And then, when you know that, then a question must form in your mind. How is it that the French were able to subdue Morocco where it is now? Where it is now. I'm not going to stray too far from the lesson because this is all inclusive. I remember asking you in a prior video, or rather stating to you, the question I asked myself about how I felt about being older than a state. Let's go back to the French in the said Morocco in Barbara. In 1957, now it is said through twistery. It is said through twistery. In 1957, Morocco won its independence from France. Now my question is, how the hell did they get in there? They had French forts. They had deployed the Foreign Legion. How did this happen? If this is your home. Now, that same year that the so-called Morocco down in Barbara gained its independence from France, everything was smooth and mellow. And what that did was it paved the way for Morocco to officially become the state of Ohio. You think that's a coincidence that both of those events occurred in 1957? Think. You think that's a coincidence? Well, it isn't. It isn't. And Tunis was moved down to Barbara, just like Egypt, Morocco, Saqqara. I know it's spelled S-A-H-A-R-A-H, but it's pronounced Saqqara. And Saqqara is now known as the state of Iowa. That's Saqqara. Now, going further, Barbara was a rather unruly portion of Southeast Africa. And those explorers that the church sent over there, a lot of them never came back. A lot of them never came back. But those who were witness to the things that happened in Barbara or at Barbara, well, they came back with tales. Tales that would make any hardened veteran sailor shake in his boots. And after more than a few people who tried to run the risk of landing at Barbara, those who made it out gave that portion of Barbara, which was close to the sea, they gave it a name. That name was the Barbary Coast, because of the barbaric things that would be done to any of those Europeans who landed there. It was called the Barbary Coast because of the barbaric measures used against any European interloper, because that's what you were down in Barbara. And when the church and its knights and papal armies went in there and finally subdued Barbara, that's when the French started building its force. The bottom line to this is this. I am trying to be as diplomatic as I can possibly be for the sake of diplomacy. But I would really like to ask that King of Morocco, I would like to ask him to run down his bloodline to me and how long his people have been there, if they are Moroccans. If they are Moroccans. And I'm being as diplomatic as I can about this, because you want to steal my heritage. And I'm not going to sit for that. I'm not going to sit for that. Because where you sit and how the world knows you, the world made you. The world put you there. So of course they're going to recognize you, because the church destroyed Morocco. Took the name and put over there in that sand pile where you sit. Run down your bloodline to me. Make me know how you are the king of Morocco. And saying that as diplomatically as I can, make me know it. Because I know different. Now, going on. If you are inclined, you should avail yourself of this particular record. A lot of it is true, but you know, there's also some chicanery in there. But the record is called Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. You avail yourself of that record. What you're going to find, well, when you get the record, you're going to astonish yourself, especially where geography is concerned. And you're going to learn that everything you've been taught was a lie. Everything you've been taught was a lie. The lie was designed to keep you as far away from the truth as you could possibly be kept. That's kind of how that went. Now, considering that the church okayed the wholesale slaughter of native peoples across the plane of earth, I took another picture. Like I said, I became an absolute shutterbug in that place. This is a picture that I took at the museum, and if you want this picture, email me and I will ensure that you get one. Now, you've heard a picture is worth 1,000 words. Let me demonstrate this one to you. What you see is a Knights Templar on horseback. And here's how you can tell that he's Knights Templar. You see that red cross on that field of white? It now symbolizes assistance and help will save you, because that is the symbol of all medical equipment and places. The Knights will help you. Look for the red cross. Now, on this picture, you see the knight on his horse, Look under his horse. Here. What this is a turban and a scimitar. This is what is left of the valiant Moor trying to defend his land. Here. Trying to defend his land here. And for you Asiatic Moors, a lot of painstaking measures have been taken to keep you away from yourself. And here's just a prime example. For those of you who like Westerns and shoot 'em ups, and where they're killing up tribal Moors, you never asked yourself, where am I? Because you were here. Those frontiersmen, they weren't just fighting the red man. But you will never see yourself in a Western. You'll never see yourself in a Western because you will have a turban on your head and you will be wielding a scimitar along with bows and arrows. You are never going to see that in the Western, but you were there. You were there. And on the agenda, to keep you as far away from yourself, the first thing that must be done is to not show you at all, as if you did not exist. You didn't exist until we said you exist. And we said you existed when you came over here on the boat because we went to Africa and brought you here. The job is done. When you get a people to believing that this is not their home, and they swallow it all, hook, line, and sinker for generations, to the point where in the 21st century, there are still Asiatics and amalgamated Moors who believe that the Asiatics here all came from Southeast Africa. No, this is Africa. We were already here. You just don't show us in your Westerns and your cowboy movies. Speaking of cowboys, we're just going to stray from geography for just a second. The word cowboy. The word cowboy was created by bigots shortly after 1865 when Lincoln and his 13th Amendment with the 20 sections, which is missing from the Constitution of the United States. When he freed the slaves, a lot of them went west because there was work out in Texas, driving cattle. And so, since the European of the day had gotten used to calling the Asiatic boy, well, the term cowboy became a derisive term because he was a boy who punched cows. He was a cowboy. That's how the term got started. Cowboy. It was a derogatory term. It was derisive, aimed at the Asiatic who went to Texas to drive cattle. But at some point, Roy Rogers became king of the cowboys. And I doubt very seriously if Roy Rogers ever had to lug a 100-pound cotton sack. How is he a cowboy? I mean, sure enough, the European colonizers, they started out trying to enslave their own. That didn't quite work out for them. But how did Roy Rogers become king of the cowboys? They have never showed a real cowboy the way the term was meant. You've never seen one. You've never seen a real cowboy. That would be an Asiatic in gear, punching cattle. I never saw him on rawhide. Chowing down with Rowdy Yates in them. I never saw that. I never saw a cowboy on the rifleman. Nope. I think the very first cowboy I ever saw was Woody Strode. But back to the lesson. When these countries were moved to different parts of Earth, then the church went into some real serious machinations that affected the world, and those effects are still being felt today. Now, where Egypt is concerned, again, Egypt was a crown jewel, along with Morocco, and so was Galilee. Galilee was special. Galilee was so special, in fact, that the Jews, that's where they decided to nail Jesus to the cross, right up the road from his Uncle Dave's. But that's another lesson. Where geography is concerned, you need to know this as well. Earth is not a round ball. It could never be. And the lands that you know by the names that were given to them by the church and those agents of the church. Their ancient names you were never meant to know. I'll share them with you because you need to know. And to my nephews and my nieces, you all need to pay strict attention. Do not do as your forerunners did. Have knowledge and keep it to yourself. You don't want to do that. Because what you're looking at today is a direct result of that having been done to both you and your sisters and your uncles and your aunts. But this is the age of Aquarius. And during the age of Aquarius, this is the age where all that was hidden shall now be revealed. It's that time. We are ending a cycle. We're ending a cycle. I'm going to close this out now. However, no. I can't without giving you this. We welcome all of you to join us during our Holy Night meetings and Sunday school. And Sunday school, I think you're going to enjoy, especially if you come and you have questions and have had questions for years. Bring them. Bring them. Bring them. And add to your scholarship, because everyone's scholarship is lacking, and it is driving you further and further to the dark, because man loves the dark. And we are revealers of the light, not concealers of the light. I bid you peace.